Notre Dame at Penn State. I got to say, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. We talked about it on Friday's show. I got to say, I need to do a victory lap. I said on every show last week, Notre Dame wins on a what, Garrett?
On a field goal, walk-off.
At the end.
Yep.
And that's pretty much what happened. I think they had to kick it off, right? Mm-hmm. They had to kick it off. Yeah. And then they had time to run that, like, and then Drew Aller couldn't, like, he overthrew the lateral at the end of the game. That's how rough of a game
rough
Drew Aller was having. Was that at the end of the game, he fired the lateral 7 yards out of bounds.
Not a good look. Not a good look, especially after the way things were going for him. Yeah, it's a rough end to him.
It was rough. We have not talked, though, about Ohio State and Texas. So we'll talk about Ohio State and Texas. We'll talk about the matchup Ohio State and Notre Dame, and then I will spend probably an inappropriate amount of time listing the grievances I have with the Cowboys. And you'll see how I feel about the firing, or it's not really firing.
I was kind of like,
the parting of ways, because he was not under contract, so you can't fire him. So McCarthy is off into the coaching ether now, and maybe the Bears or Saints will hire him, which I think he might do really well with the Bears, you know, as far as like Bears standards are doing. But we'll get to that in a second. First off, Garrett, Ohio State and Texas was close.
It was. The
entire game. Texas, though, their flaws, and you got to see kind of the whole Quinn Ewers spectrum,
experiment.
Right?
Yeah, it was, yes.
Where, oh my gosh, look at those throws he can make. Look what he can do. I saw somebody make the point of Ewers was probably always an air raid guy, and Sark's system is not air raid. You know, it is Sark's. It's got air raid concept. The reason I like Sark's offense is it is multiple as hell.
Yeah.
Like, it's got air raid concepts. It's got pistol concepts. It's got just line it up and run the ball. Like, it's got all these different things that are in it because he's been a lot of different places and done a lot of different things. That's what I love about the Texas offense is if you were going to try to pin it down into what it is, it's a multiple look offense. It is actually Ohio State's is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, they're pretty much
Kelly
the
and
same.
Sark just kind of have this. All right, we can do all these things. So we have all, like, part of the reason they can be so multiple is they have all these different weapons, right? They have all these different things, both teams that can do all these things. What the difference was, I think, in this game was Texas made like the biggest mistakes that they couldn't come back from. Obviously, the last one being the Jack Sawyer 83-yard fumble recovery, which was the stamp that Ohio State needed. Not running at the 1 yard line. Like,
that was stupid.
Like, yeah, not getting it from the 1 yard
that.
line. That all led to that. That all led to, you know, where they were, right? It all led there. And, you know, this game was a handoff to Quintravian Wisner away from being probably the way it was going, an overtime game.
Right.
Like, it was probably going to go into overtime. But it was a fantastic game. I don't think Texas needs to hang their heads on this season, maybe in this particular game, but we saw the way that they just played down the stretch where, I mean, they dominated A&M defensively, and they won that game 17-7.
Right.
Well, that's not a dominating score, but A&M was they were stopped at every opportunity they were given. And Mike Elko knew that he was not going to beat them with field goals.
Right.
Or at least he thought he wasn't. Had he kicked 3 field goals, they would have. Well, let's see. Yeah, they would have been down a point. But like, had he kicked 3 field goals,
it would have been
the
interesting.
difference instead of going for it. But you're also not going to like go in with the game plan of I'm going to beat Texas by kicking field goals. Mm-hmm. You can't look at that, especially early on. The 2 drives that they had that ended where they could have scored and didn't because they went for it on 4th down. Then a really bad play call on 4th down towards the end of the game. Didn't score any offensive points. Like pick 6 was the only thing. But you saw Texas's offensive flaws. I don't think you really saw the other night. I still think the Texas defense is absolutely. It's in my opinion that we saw the 2 best defenses in the 2 of the 3 best defenses in the country the other night on display. And so you're gonna like it's when it's athlete on athlete. To me, it doesn't really matter where each thing is ranked when you have that kind of. I mean, it's alpha dogs across the board. When you're talking about Caleb Downs in coverage versus the Texas wide receivers,
right?
That's and Denzel Burke, like all the guys that they have, Igbenson, all that, the pass rushers. Tuiolomau and Jack Sawyer, Tyler Williams, the defensive tackle, those linebackers they have, that's elite on elite, all the way across the board. Offensive line, defensive line, elite on elite, 11 versus 11, all the way across the board. Flip it, elite on elite, 11 on 11, all the way across the board. And look, Jeremiah Smith wasn't a factor in the game.
Right.
He wasn't a factor. The running backs, though, were. And I think Cam Skattebo might have broke him. And Texas gets to join a long list of teams that Cam Skattebo broke.
Right? I mean, yeah, I would say he laid the blueprint with it.
Yeah.
The thing with this Texas team was I feel like when they got matched athlete for athlete, and we only seen it happen a few times, Georgia was able to do it. Ohio State was able to do it. It came down to efficiency. And that was one thing where Quinn Ewers was inconsistent all years long. I've never even given thought to the notion that offense wasn't the right fit for Quinn. I don't agree with that. I think it was the right fit for him because while it's not necessarily, like you mentioned, all air raid, the concepts of it are mostly air raid, and that's what he's going to be playing in if he wants to be successful in the NFL. So it was the perfect opportunity for him. I think what you saw was a guy who was inconsistent, who throughout his entire career got matched in the moment. He made some, and it wasn't all on Quinn. That loss wasn't on him. To me, when you get in that situation, you get the ball all the way down to the 1. I don't understand where you don't just put, and I know this will be controversial or whatever, but you've already had success earlier in the game putting Arch in and letting him run. That was the perfect opportunity to do it again, or just go big and put a bunch of guys up there and run it with Quinn. I don't like the idea of trying to get cute and run a sweep because Ohio State could match you athlete for athlete, and it showed to be successful there. I think Texas is going to be fine. What I'm going to be looking forward to going forward is, like, I think Quinn could never match the hype that was around him, whether that's fair or unfair. Now can Arch do that? I think you're going to see this other microscope with Arch coming in a similar situation where can he match that and be able to get them over the top? I've seen stuff coming out about Sark. I think Sark's the perfect guy for the job there. He's going to be fine. Texas is going to be perfectly fine. They just got beat by a team that was on their level and could match them. I think we got the right teams in the championship game. And yeah, I think it's setting up to be a great matchup that we're going to be able to watch in Atlanta. And
we had Dave Bartu on Friday, and what he said is it's going to set up for the brands.
Absolutely.
But it's going to reshuffle which brands are the ones that get in. Like, so I'm going to say there's going to be 20 teams we're going to see regularly run through this, which is basketball. We see about 11 to 12 teams kind of regularly run through this. And then you get peppered in, like you get a Baylor that wins, every so often, but like it is between UConn and Duke and Kansas and Kentucky,
right.
Those things. So you'll see it, and it'll roll and roll and roll and roll. And I think the parity will expand over time as the money, because the money I think is going to flow in a lot of different directions. Right now everybody's got their chips pushed in to the middle of the table on the Big Ten and the SEC, and I think this year was the first one. We need to see more of where, you know what, the chips are going to be pushed in on the brands, which makes you like a little suspicious of the Super League and whether conferences are going to be relevant down the line. I'll worry about that when we come to it because nothing that we've ever heard really makes sense in that. But I think they got it right. There's no SEC teams in the final. And again, if you give them more opportunities to lose, this is the case for not just the SEC, but for everybody, they'll lose. Everybody will, like, given more opportunity, things will change. You throw more games in there, people will lose more. You throw games in there against better teams, people will lose more. It's not the end of the world when they do until it is the playoff. That is what is, like, you know, they say they're taking all this weight out of the regular season. I think they've just changed the emphasis in the regular season.
Definitely.
You know, you have to
go ahead.
How many times have we seen a team that is national championship caliber lose a key game in September and then wind up 9-3 because they just knew that it was like over? Like they couldn't do it
multiple times.
Unless they're, well, yeah. So why not let that team go 10-3 in the regular, you know, with the regular season, maybe in the conference, and then make it in and see if they can actually do it. You know, the NFL, major, like professional sports, have this playoff thing right. You know, if a losing streak at an early part of the season meant you weren't good enough to win because of injuries or whatever, then what are we talking about? You know, also, how many Super Bowl champion teams could you take out because of a 2-game losing streak at a key point in the season? If you'd been like, oh, well, I mean, it's 2 in a row for the Chiefs. I guess they're not going to win it this year.
Yeah.
Well, no, man, like let them play it out. Like let's have some playoffs. Let's do this, you know. And if you don't want to have playoffs, okay, then let's just not have bowl games or anything, and we'll go to the English soccer table, which is essentially what we were before, which Americans will not like.
No, they will not.
Yeah. The last thing that Americans and like American football fans want to see is
soccer.
Okay, we didn't win our last game, but if Ohio State loses, then we win the title.
No.
I mean, and granted, soccer plays so many more games.
Yeah.
So they have a very long season. I completely understand why they do it that way. You know, and then they have international, and then they do these things. Like, I get it. But that's not how we're set up. We have playoffs for our things, and that's fine, and their thing is fine. But let's not just throw it all together. I like that it's Ohio State and Notre Dame, even though I'm not like, you know, we're not talking about Cinderella here.
Right.
But we're talking about a team that hasn't won since 2014, and before that hadn't won since 2002. Or no, it wasn't 2000. Yeah, it was. That was like, so they won one with Tressel. They won one with Urban Meyer. Now, Ohio State, and here's what I think a lot of people don't realize. They're the most consistent team of the last half century. Woody Hayes, like, who's ever been the coach, like, save for a cut, like, even John Cooper. I know they didn't like him because he didn't win a title, but they were always good. They just didn't beat Michigan. They didn't win the national title, right? Lloyd Carr was better. Then Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer flipped the whole Michigan thing in his ear. But, you know, save for about 7 seasons of the last 50, and it may not even be that many, Ohio State's the most consistent team.
Definitely up there. I mean, them and Bama, yeah.
It's them. Like, Alabama's had dark, long stretches. Georgia had dark, long stretches. You know, you name a blue blood, like Florida, like name any team. Ohio State gets like a year or two where it's like, meh, and then they get back to it. Because they've always been probably the best run athletic department in the country, even including Texas, which is a very well-run athletic department. It gets feast or famine here in Texas. I think most of the time that is. And Ohio State, here's what Ohio State only has to worry about. And this is a benefit to them, their only real rival is Michigan. It's the only one they care about. Now, Penn State, Michigan State, all these teams can hate on them, but the only one that they care about winning is Michigan. So they only really have to worry about Michigan's doing. Michigan is the same way, and they still have Michigan State, who they don't like, but it's completely that.
Right.
Why Texas, I think, is a little bit different is that everyone in the state who's not them hates them.
Yep.
And they can get hyper-focused on one target for too long, and the other ones then nibble off of them. And that's not necessarily their fault. It's just like, okay, Oklahoma's the biggest one, and then, for a long time, A&M was like 1A, 1B, 1A and 1B. I don't care what you say, it's 1A and 1B. Like that's how it works. It does not work that way for A&M. A&M, it's just Texas. Texas, and then all the other people who say they're rivals of A&M refuses to acknowledge them.
Like
even
Texas
though,
Tech.
like Tech, that's a rivalry, man.
It is.
A&M has to address that. The reason they don't want to, because then they'd have to really look at that record over the last 20 years and go, oh, man, we didn't do well in that
They're
rivalry.
so similar,
I'm really glad that we left the Big 12, because that was one that we were having trouble figuring out all of a sudden. But Texas, okay, it's Oklahoma's really good, and they got hyper-focused on Oklahoma. Well, then, Baylor comes swinging out of nowhere and beats them a few years in a row, and then all their focus is Baylor.
Right.
How can we make our offense like Baylor's? How can we do this?
Can we get their coach?
Can we get their coach? Oh, we can't get their coach. Let's go find somebody who coached with one of his coaches in high school. Like, that's like when they went to get Sterling Gilbert.
Yeah.
Sterling Gilbert worked with Mike Spradlin.
Oh my God.
Who worked with Art Briles at Houston, but he worked with Mike Spradlin at Temple High School.
Oh my God.
So they went they were running a huge filter on how can we run this Briles offense, as opposed to just
being
figure out
authentic.
your own thing.
Yeah.
Like
You're Texas.
figure out your own thing. And guess what they've done with Sark?
Figured
Figured out their own thing. That's what you have to. You're not going to make it to the tip top of the list copying anybody.
No.
You can learn from people and take little
your own
parts of
spin
it
on it, yeah.
But if I'm going to say I'm the best chef, I have to have my own unique spin.
Right.
That doesn't mean that I do it completely differently than everybody else. Everybody makes tomato sauce basically the same way. What makes mine different that you go, ooh, this is why this is the best, spaghetti and meatballs in Little Italy.
Right.
That's why. And so what makes it different and how you can keep on moving the pieces around the chessboard. That's why Nick Saban was elite at it. You know what? You guys have all, everybody else in the SEC figured out how I have my the secret recipe's out. You've hired enough of my people. The secret recipe's out. Okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. We are going to add some new items to the menu. So that's what happens. And then you're like, oh, great, we can't copy it anymore.
Yep.
Oh, you guys, Chick-fil-A, you guys are all doing chicken sandwiches now. All right. Well, we're going to use some ingredients that you guys are too cheap to use. Pimento cheese, anybody? All right, good deal. See you later, cheapskates. All right. Yeah, put all the spicy mayonnaise you wanted at Popeyes. Right.
So
it's just mayonnaise, man. You didn't do anything to the chicken. It's just mayonnaise.
As far as the national championship goes, do you see any, I just think Notre Dame, I don't necessarily think Notre Dame can hang with Ohio State. And I'm nervous. I know they have a really good defense. Really, really good defense. I just feel like I don't necessarily think on the outside they have the dudes that can match Ohio State's receivers. And if that rushing attack is rolling early, I think that could be a long night for the Irish. I hope not. I really like Riley Leonard in this, but I feel like the injuries for Notre Dame right now, especially along the offensive line, are finally catching up with them. I know this is as far as the spread goes, this looks like this is still going to be a close game. I believe it was a 9.5 point spread right now. What are your overall thoughts on this match? Legitimately, do you see Notre Dame being able to hang with them?
Yes, I do.
I hope they do.
Because Notre Dame's defense is legit.
No, they're awesome.
Because they're so physical, right?
Right.
And because they are so physical, they change the complexion of games. That's the thing is you get knocked around and out. Tell me how those running backs feel when they've been hit. Mm-hmm. It just changes things. That Texas could do that too, but I do think they did wear down a little bit. And Ohio State changed things up enough from what I think people were used to seeing over this playoff run to where they've been able to get on a roll.
Right.
And then, okay, well, let's make sure that Jeremiah Smith doesn't do anything.
But see, I don't think I don't
and
see
then they
him
have
not
these other
having a
weapons
good game again. Like
What?
I don't see Jeremiah Smith coming out and not balling
Oh,
out.
no.
I think he's going to go off.
But I think Notre Dame. Look, Ohio State's big favorites in this game for a reason, and I see that. But Notre Dame also has this team of destiny vibe where they just don't let you. I mean, Penn State had about 5 or 6 opportunities to put that game in a position where Notre Dame would have been desperate. And they never did. You know why? Because Notre Dame doesn't let you, they don't let you run away.
Right.
So if they don't let you run away and they make the kind of plays they make on defense, that's what makes them so tough to beat, is that, you cannot go and hide against Notre Dame. Look, the only team that beat them this year beat them on a last-second miracle field goal, so they didn't go and hide either.
No.
Notre Dame just didn't play well on offense that day. And then the rest of the teams they've beaten this year, outside of Penn State and maybe one other, have been substantial. Like, they beat the crap out of Georgia.
Yeah.
They beat Georgia down, and so that's why I think they can hang. If they can make it like the Penn State game where you don't know why your weapons aren't working or why these things aren't going, or the Georgia game, if they can play that game again, it's going to be a lot harder because of the weapons. But if they can, keep everything in their bubble, then they can make this game just like every other game they play, where it comes right down to who's going to mess up at the end and who's going to capitalize on that mistake.
Right.
If you go back to the very beginning of the year, if you remember that A&M game, that game was so tense until Notre Dame's experience got over on A&M and their physicality got over on A&M, and it was just too much in the end.
Right.
Wasn't a blowout, but at the end of the game, Notre Dame asserted their dominance. They were in control. The other thing is, I'm gonna put Riley Leonard in the Josh Heupel category of quarterbacks. When Oklahoma won the national title under Bob Stoops, if you go back and watch Josh Heupel, there was never a point during that season at all where you would have looked at Josh Heupel and go, man, this guy's doing some unbelievable stuff. I don't know how well you remember that season, Garrett.
I remember it. I remember it
effing vividly.
I bet you do.
Because of how it ended. I remember that Oklahoma that year was the team of destiny. And I can tell you, I'm sure there's some Oklahoma fans or Oklahoma State fans or Texas fans that remember 2000 and can give me other examples. But I will tell you from a person who, and again, that was, I didn't get to see them play like now. I'd get to see them play every game.
Yeah.
Back then, I got to see them play about half of them, but I got to see them play. I remember watching that A&M game on television, and A&M had 4 chances in that game, kind of like Penn State against Notre Dame, to where you don't make a mistake here, you're going to win the game.
Right, yeah.
They had, I think, it was Jamar Toombs back then. They had Jamar Toombs. They had the ball at the 3-yard line and ran 4 pass plays in a row. And R.C. Slocum knew as soon as it was over, he's like, I just outthought myself.
Yep.
Sometimes when you have this gigantic wrecking ball at the 3-yard line, just do it. You just say, hey, I'm doing this. We're going to do this 4 times. And if you can stop it 4 times, more power to you.
Right.
We're not going to one time might be the left, one time might be to the right, the other 2 might be straight up the middle. But number 5 here weighs 285 pounds, and he runs like a 4.6 right now. And 285 at 4.6 feels about like 210 at 4.2, right? It's going to feel like you got hit by a train. So go ahead and try to get in the way if you want to. But they didn't. They created big turnovers, and there was that. Then Florida State, in that last game, Chris Chris Weinke's the Heisman Trophy winner, right? And really, I mean, other than the Miami loss that they had early in that season on wide right 3, another game I was at, which again, I got to unpack a lot of trauma from that shit. But including I got the shit kicked out of me at that game too. That was not fun. And not like a guy just wailed me in the back of the head.
Oh yeah.
Told me to sit down, and then when I stood back up to him, he hit me he kind of hit me in the chest. And I was like, I hadn't even seen what he looked like yet. And then when I finally came to, my friends were like, "Oh, whoa. We looked at him and we're like, sorry, he was gigantic. He was gigantic. That was one of those old Orange Bowl, are you alive? Okay, then it's not assault.
Right.
Are you conscious? Okay.
We're good.
We only consider pressing charges at the Orange Bowl if you're unconscious. And then we go to, are you unconscious because you're a bitch or because somebody actually hurt you? Yeah. So, that's how that worked. But FSU was just, they were so good. Now, Miami, really might have had the argument. They lost later in the season. They probably could have been in that game and probably would. That was 2000 Miami.
Oh, yeah.
Which was the, embryonic stage of 2001 Miami. So I think that Miami team in 2000 would have mopped the floor with Josh Heupel on that team. But if you go and watch the national championship game, I think the final score was 13-2 or something stupid like that. FSU, it was bad. It was bad. Snoop Minnis, FSU's best receiver, wasn't eligible. He didn't take his finals. I don't know, whatever. They had a ton of drop passes in the game. Oklahoma did not do anything spectacular. Nothing spectacular.
No.
Nothing. But at every chance, FSU's number 1 ranked defense had a chance to get a stop that would have given them the ball back in better field position. They would throw a little flare pass out to Quentin Griffin, and they get a first down.
Yep.
And it wasn't spectacular. Riley, that's a long story to say. Riley Leonard is like that. He's a better passer, but he's still not that great of a passer. But you can go the first quarter, and he can be 2 of 7. But then all of a sudden, he's 12 of his next 13, and you're like, wait a minute, you sucked a minute ago.
It's like Baker Mayfield.
Yes.
He's a lot like Baker Mayfield.
And so Baker's a little bit different. He's somewhere in the middle of that. He's somewhere in the middle, and because when you have a guy like that no matter what you do, and that's, I think, the difference between Riley Leonard and Drew Aller right now, is that Riley Leonard figured out at no point during this game, no matter what's going on, am I going to get rattled. Drew Aller got rattled early in that game, and he couldn't shake it. You could see it in his face. And Riley Leonard,
he don't care.
He's just over there going all right, good deal. After the game, I'm going to see my girlfriend and my parents. We're going to have a nice big steak, no matter what happens. We all played hard. He's got that kind of Chris Traeger optimism.
Right.
I have expected him to see, Marcus Freeman, how you doing? Jeremiah Love, my favorite running back, literally in the entire world. He has that kind of ridiculous, infectious enthusiasm about him, where he'll just, I can see him going over to Coach Denbrock and saying, Coach, I think that would be a good idea if we threw the ball a little bit more. And Coach said, okay, we will, but we're going to focus on the wide receivers and not the tight ends.
Yeah.
That is literally the best idea I've ever heard in my life. Thank you, Coach. Can't wait to get out there. Boop, 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 boop. And then Drew Aller, misses 4 passes in a row, and he's like, I suck at football.
Yeah.
What is going on? There's no end to this black abyss. If he can get over that, they can win with Drew Aller big time.
They could.
And he proved it this year. They're this close. But I think that was the difference in his game is when the going got tough, he just got rattled.
Right.
That's where Riley Leonard, it was like, hey, do you know you're 2 for 8 right now? And he's like, am I? That's hilarious. I'll do better.
Hold my beer.
Josh Heupel was like that when he was at Oklahoma. You'd be like, hey, you guys haven't converted a third down the last 6 tries. Has it been 6? Whoa. Yeah. Well, we don't want to go too long, that's just kind of how it is. They didn't do that. So, yeah, that's why I think Notre Dame can win because they've got this. Nobody's told that, they haven't heard that they're not supposed to be there.
Right.
Nobody, maybe now they have, or maybe they will a little bit, but all the things that people said about them, they just don't hear them. They just don't.
Yeah.
And I think I don't even think it starts with Marcus Freeman. I think he certainly helps out in that. I think it starts with Riley Leonard. Like, you know, I think you look around like, hey, I'm playing quarterback at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
There's movies from the damn 20s about me, like the 30s, about guys like this, you know. The President of the United States played a Notre Dame guy in a movie.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
You know, there's a pretty, I don't see, you know, George Bush starring in a movie about Quinn, you know, I say Quinn Ewers, about James Street, you know,
okay, I got to ask you this now that you said that. So the whole notion and the narrative around Notre Dame about them actually becoming likable now, which I find hilarious.
They're this Notre Dame team, 2024, 2025 Notre Dame, is more likable than most Notre Dame teams.
Ever. That I've seen.
Yeah. And they're more likable than Ryan Day.
Oh, hell yeah.
I don't dislike the play. Oh, Will Howard, none of the players. I don't dislike the players at Ohio State. But Ryan Day is infinitely and you saw that in the press conference with Sark. Mm-hmm. One of those guys is really likable, and one of them is not.
Correct.
Marcus Freeman and James Franklin, same thing. One of them is likable, one of them is not. Marcus Freeman is really likable. Ryan Day is not. So because of that, Notre Dame is infinitely more likable by comparison. Mm-hmm. But even with Marcus Freeman as likable, if you had him faced up against, you know, a coach that's kind of on that level of everybody likes this guy.
Right. Like a Dan Lanning, if he was facing Oregon or something.
Yeah. Or, you know, trying to think of somebody else that everybody likes. It's very rare.
It is rare. I would probably put Kenny Dillingham up there. I think
Kenny Dillingham. If it's Marcus Freeman and Kenny Dillingham, then everybody's going to root for Arizona State and not Notre Dame.
Exactly.
You know, fair. No matter how likable it is, they're Notre Dame.
Yeah.
They were the big bad wolf forever. Yep. Okay. We've given you a long time without a break. We're going to take a break right here. When we come back,